Hey class, sorry, I'm trying a different thing. You can see my messy house in the background. All right, so this we're going to talk about unpacking, which I love. Unpacking is awesome. It's the secret sauce to doing amazing work. And as I think I mentioned before, it's one of those skills that is going to set you apart from people that can do much more of the kind of more straightforward parts of design thinking. I'm going to give you some additional tools in the past. Now, I know some of you mentioned like, I'm kind of struggling to get this. Yeah, it's hard, but we blasted through it that first time. So now it's going to be easier. And why? Because I'm going to give you some additional tools. First of all, secondly, you're going to be doing it with your teammates, and it's a lot easier to do when you're doing it as part of a group. So trust me, it's going to get easier. It's going to be awesome. And you are going to seem like a wizard after this because people aren't going to know how you do it. And this is a skill, it's a muscle, like all the stuff that we're doing. You're going to flex it and it's going to become huge. You're going to be totally swole, as some of the kids or the gym bros say. Okay. All right. So what we'll do, this is the kind of thing where you can't do powerful unpacking unless you have done a good interview. Okay. So it's going to be much, you need to have the basics of doing a good interview down. But once you do that, this is what we call unpacking. Some people call it sense making, analysis, synthesis. There's a bunch of ways people talk about it. But basically, this is where you're taking all that stuff that you heard in all those interviews, and now you're condensing it and spotting patterns and seeing what's meaningful in it. All right, so I want to show you a couple things. I found this helpful in past classes. I'm going to show you what this looks like in real life. Okay, so the project I'm about to share with you was a project that my wife and I, who, if you don't know, we work together. We have a design studio together, and sometimes we work on projects together, sometimes apart. But this was a project we worked on together. It was for the Claremont colleges in Southern California. They asked us to create they had a really vague prompt. They said, yeah, we'd love to explore what it would be like to have a creativity and innovation, or we'd love to have some kind of center that's around creativity and innovation and maybe entrepreneurship. And, it seems really cool to do something like the D School, but we're not quite sure what that would be. So we used this process, design thinking, to help figure out what would make the most sense within that academic context. And it's a consortium of 5 colleges. There's like Pomona, Claremont McKenna, Harvey Mudd, Pitzer, and Scripps. So I'll show you a couple of the ways that we did it. It's going to look a little different than how you're doing it because, of course, as we were doing it, we weren't forced to be social distancing. Okay. So this was kind of one of the ways we talked about it, right? We were sharing, just elements of what we were doing, right? We were relationship building. We were going to classes. We were doing interviews. We were doing prototypes. Here, this was one of the ways that we talked to all the folks we talked to, or that we represented the folks we talked to. Okay, so number of folks. And then we pulled out one of the key quotes, right? This should be a place for experimentation and play. That was one of the things that kind of kept coming up consistently. Here's just, it's work. The process of unpacking it, a lot of times it seems like, hey, are we just talking? But one of the ways around that is to start to externalize what you're doing. Okay, so that this is in our house. My wife is, we're arguing, we're putting stuff on the whiteboard, we're moving categories around. You can see we've got issues where there's a bunch of things we don't know where they fit, but we're trying to make sense of it. And that's the key thing. It takes time, but we're making sense of it. Here, this is where we started to tease out all the themes that were just like kind of key things we heard. I can't remember. I don't have the category posted here, but I can't remember what this was. But the critical part of it was we were taking all of these things that we heard, the critical quotes, and putting them on Post-it notes and putting them up on a board, right? Getting critical. That'll be a challenge for you all because we don't have the same kind of external things at our disposal. But this is something that personally, you all are, this is one of the areas where I think you can actually make a huge difference and empower things forward by the new methods that you come up with. But the key thing is get out of your heads, get off of your computers, and put things on the wall. It will help you tremendously, and it helps unlock new thinking. All right. Here is something where we narrowed into this theme of collaboration, right? So we put down like a bunch of different of the quotes that related to collaboration, and then we kind of outlined, as you might, I'm not sure if you can see my cursor, but there's elements here where this challenges traditional notions of preparation. The college doesn't value what faculty value. These are a couple of things that kind of came through that were things that seemed true and resonant, of course, across a large population of folks we talked to. And then here we were just, trying to tell the story, right? Figure out ways to kind of capture all of this. And then again, additional areas. Here, this was again, meanwhile, we're trying to, think like, well, is this a model that makes sense? Is this what's going on here? So thinking of these different ways to try to make sense of the situation. And then finally, we translated that into how might we statements, which are very similar to what you all did for your game changers. Okay. But try to think of like if experiential learning fills a critical gap, as you can see in that Post-it note on the left, then some of the questions were, well, how might we give students the confidence to make their ideas real? How might we prepare students to grapple with ambiguity? How might we impact the lessons of project-based learning or impart the lessons of project-based learning into a traditional class environment, right? All of these ways are ways of framing the problem and then seeing if there's a way that we can flip it around to make it a generative statement. Okay. So then from there, and then this is where we were then later on, we were reporting to the folks who had hired us. We said, okay, here's what we did. We did a bunch of, ethnographic interviews with students, faculty, and alumni. From those, we heard all these potential needs. We focused on a couple of critical needs, right? So there was this experiential learning. We heard needs around collaboration, and we heard needs around exploration, right? And for each of those, we shared a quote, and then we translated that into core principles for the initiative. So this work, just again, it's not just things that are academic exercises. This is, how we actually worked. And one of the things that was really incredible to us, and one of the reasons this is a project that I'm so proud of, is that we were able, through this initial framing stage, initially they said, hey, can you give us a blueprint, like a document to talk about it? And what we did is we gave them a document, this is part of it that you're seeing, but we also prototyped our way there and really showed the value of it. And we were successful enough that initially they were hoping they would get like a $10 million investment. And at the end of the day, the donors, who you can see here, Rick and Susan Sontag, they donated $25 million for this initiative. So this is something that's still going on. It's got a whole building, as you can kind of see here. We built it out for a year. It has all sorts of programming. So there's all sorts of ways that this is a real project. It became a real thing. And there were very hard-nosed business people who saw real value in it.